Of all the spokes on the longevity wheel, I hear you say all the time that AMPK and Nrf2 are fundamental.
They absolutely are. That is the most fundamental. And what are they really in charge of? When you boil it all down, they're cleaners. It's about keeping the cells and the whole body clean. Just like an engine, when it gets filled with old mucky oil, just is bogged down. All of the reactions in your cell, all of the power plants in your cell, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, they are affected by a buildup of environmental waste and your own cellular waste. They're just gumming up the system. And if you want it to run clean, and longevity is about clean running, then you need both Nrf2 and AMPK active for you.
So Nrf2 has to do with removing toxins, turning up your natural detoxification process.
Right. And let's distinguish endogenous and exogenous toxins. That means exogenous means from outside. So these are environmental toxins, metals like mercury, cadmium, lead, pesticides, herbicides, gasoline residues, all these things that are coming in. But then you're generating toxins all the time. Your cells are very metabolically active, and there's the waste products of the reactions, but there's also the waste products of your production of things like proteins. So proteins are really immaculately built. They've got primary, secondary, and tertiary structures. So they're built in these chains that fold over one another, but then you fold them into these tertiary structures that are key to their working. So you can view them like little origami swans. And so you make your origami swan and it flies off into the cell and it does its thing. Or you just grab a piece of paper and crumple it up. You're like, well, I didn't fold that very well. Was it just evaporate? Do you take it apart?
Yeah,
no,
what happens?
They build up. And they build up and they become this cellular waste until you trigger something called the unfolded protein response, where you respond to that and you take them all apart. It's a subset of autophagy.
So that's part of AMPK.
AMPK activation brings autophagy, and that's through something called mTOR blocking. So usually when it's about balances of macronutrients, when you have a lot of carbs and proteins on board, the insulin from the carbs and the branched chain amino acids in the protein stimulate mTOR to go forward. Now this is stimulating anabolism. You're going to build. You're going to build muscle. You're going to store fat.
Which is great when we're young.
Yeah, and it's great if you're not doing it all the time. So you have a lot of food. You store glycogen. You store fat. You build muscle. And then when you run out, and the problem these days is we never run out of food. So that when you run out, what do? You turn inward. You mobilize your fat for energy, turn it into ketones and burn ketones. And for protein, you go into all these unfolded proteins, all these damaged organelles, damaged cells, and you wrap them in something called an autophagosome. And then that joins with a lysosome, and you get all of the enzymes to break everything down. And you break all those old proteins down into constituent amino acids
to be
give
reused
them back to the cell. So it's this internal recycling. And see what happens when you don't do that. The fat accumulations and the protein accumulations stimulate an inflammatory process that in aging we call inflammaging. It's nuclear factor kappa beta, NFKB. It's the slow burn inflammation that's the result of all this waste buildup. And that's the thing that results in insulin resistance, in sort of the cardiovascular inflammation and the cardiovascular
all the symptoms of aging.
They all come with that. So when you AMPK activate, that's by either carb restriction, calorie restriction, or by taking supplements like those in AMPK Charge or the One or NAD Platinum. All those have an AMPK stimulating activity, which turns you inward into this cleanup situation.
Beautiful. So tell me about the overlap of Nrf2 and AMPK.
Yeah, you know, for a long time I was all about Nrf2, and it was like, wow, look at all these things that it does. And I didn't realize that a lot of the compounds that stimulate Nrf2 also stimulate AMPK. Something like lipoic acid, big overlap, quercetin, big overlap, berberine. And independently, Nrf2 is much more easily triggered. And what comes with Nrf2, but all the chemoprotection stuff, all the detox chemicals, the enzymes, the transporters, that is much more easily triggered when AMPK levels are high. So AMPK is almost inducing you, dragging you along into not just the cellular debris cleanup and regeneration, but the environmental toxin cleanup at the same time.
Perfect. What a great explanation. I can see why this spoke of the wheel is so important. Thank you, Dr. Shade.
Thank you.